Music has a pulse, a heartbeat that connects us all. Afrobeat is that thunderous roar from West Africa, a sound that exploded with stories, struggles, and celebration. It's a powerful fusion traditional Yoruba music, high life, and a groove that traveled across the ocean and back. More than dance music, Afrobeat was a revolution set to a beat. From Lagos clubs to global charts, its driving horns, intricate guitars, and polyrhythmic drums became a universal language. Pioneers like Fela Kuti and Tony Allen fused James Brown's funk, high-life swing, and political fire into a soundtrack for a movement. This is the story of how a regional sound became a global phenomenon, forever changing music. Welcome to the journey of Afrobeat. Afrobeat's story is one of connection, sounds and ideas traveling across the Atlantic, shaped by history and migration. African rhythms survived in the Caribbean, transforming into reggae, calypso, ska, and soca. When these styles returned to Africa, musicians recognized their shared roots and began a musical conversation. Caribbean grooves and storytelling inspired Afrobeat's political edge and global appeal. Today, artists like Burna Boy and Wizkid continue this dialogue, blending Afrobeat with Caribbean rhythms. The bridge between Africa and the Caribbean is stronger than ever, uniting cultures through music. This is how a beat from Africa, seasoned with Caribbean spice, created a groove for the world. To understand Afrobeat, go back to the soil of West Africa, where music was life, marking every moment and telling every story. The foundation was polyrhythm, many rhythms, layered and complex, creating a dense, powerful sound. Instruments like the djembe, talking drum, and kora each played a role in this musical democracy. These traditions formed the DNA of West African music, the raw material for Afrobeat. The music was already alive in the communities, waiting for a new generation to shape it. Political and social changes would provide the spark, but the soul was always African. Afrobeat's roots are deep, built on rhythm, community, and history. The groove was ready for revolution. As West Africa modernized, highlife emerged, a fusion of local melodies and Western instruments born in Ghana's coastal cities. Highlife's big bands, bright horns, and fluid guitars set the stage for Afrobeat's evolution. It was optimistic, blending old and new and teaching musicians to arrange, swing, and innovate. Stars like E.T. Mensah and Bobby Benson became pioneers, creating a modern African sound. Highlife was the first major conversation between African and Western music. But a restless new generation was listening, ready to push boundaries. The stage was set for something revolutionary. The 1960s brought independence and a surge of creativity across Africa. Musicians sought a sound that reflected their new identity, proudly African, yet global. Jazz, funk, and the Black Power movement inspired them to experiment and speak out. Music became a vehicle for political and cultural messages, not just dance. The deep rhythms of tradition, the arrangements of highlife, and the fire of funk were all in place. All that was needed was a visionary to unite them. Afrobeat was about to be born. Every revolution has a leader. Afrobeat's was Fela Kuti. Born into a prominent Nigerian family, Fela chose music over medicine, studying jazz in London. He formed Kula Lobitos, blending highlife and jazz, but the true Afrobeat sound was still forming. Returning to Nigeria, Fela experimented, making his music more complex and improvisational. He named his new style Afrobeat, African roots fused with jazz and funk. Fela was restless, searching for a sound and a message that matched the times. With his band and ambition, he was ready for transformation. The world was about to meet Fela Anikulapo Kuti. A band is more than its frontman. Fela Kuti was the face of Afrobeat, but Tony Allen was its heartbeat, the engine. Without Tony Allen, there is no Afrobeat. He was a drummer of incredible skill and imagination, blending jazz, funk, and Nigerian rhythms into something revolutionary. Tony Allen was more than a drummer, he was the architect of Afrobeat's groove. In 1969, Fela Kuti's American detour changed everything. Stranded in Los Angeles, he met Sandra Isidori, who introduced him to Black Power and radical ideas. Inspired, Fela fused American funk with Afro jazz, birthing Afrobeat. a new sound with a powerful political message. The revolution had begun. While Fela and his band were absorbing the funk of America, another sound was drifting across the Atlantic. This sound came from the island of Jamaica. It was reggae, a music of protest, spirituality, and deep, heavy rhythm. Reggae was another branch of the same tree, another child of the African diaspora. Its roots were in the very same West African polyrhythms that formed the basis of high life. But in Jamaica, these rhythms had mutated. They had slowed down, absorbing the island's unique feel. The result was a groove that was both relaxed and incredibly powerful. It was a sound that resonated deeply with Nigerian musicians. The most iconic element of reggae is the one-drop rhythm. In most Western music, the emphasis is on the first and third beats of a measure. In reggae, the kick drum and the bass often skip the first beat, placing the heavy accent on the third beat. This creates a feeling of space, of a forward-leaning momentum. When musicians in Lagos heard this, it was a revelation. It was a different way to feel the pulse. It wasn't the frantic, multi-layered attack of funk. It was patient. It was hypnotic. This one-drop feel began to creep into the Afrobeat sound, providing a new texture and a different kind of intensity. You can hear this influence in the bass lines. Afrobeat bass is typically busy playing complex, melodic lines that dance around the drums. But after the reggae connection, you start to hear a different approach. Sometimes the bass would simplify, locking into a heavy, repetitive pattern that emphasized the downbeat, much like a reggae bassist. This created a solid foundation, a deep pocket for the other instruments to float on top of. It gave the music a new kind of weight. It was the perfect counterpoint to the soaring horns and chattering guitars, anchoring the sprawling jams in a deep, earthy groove. This wasn't about copying reggae, it was about a conversation. Fela and other musicians saw reggae not as a foreign style, but as a kindred spirit. Bob Marley was singing about oppression, spiritual liberation, and Pan-Africanism. These were the same themes Fela was exploring. The one-drop rhythm was more than just a beat. It was the sound of a shared struggle. It was the echo of Africa calling back to itself from across the water. By incorporating that feel, Afrobeat was expanding its vocabulary, creating a sound that was even more deeply connected to the global Black experience. The Caribbean influence wasn't just about rhythm, it was also about storytelling. Long before reggae took over, the dominant sound of the Southern Caribbean was calypso. Born in Trinidad and Tobago, calypso was the voice of the people. Its practitioners, the Calypsonians, were more than just singers. They were journalists, social commentators, and satirists. They used their music to talk about everything from local gossip to political corruption. They were masters of lyrical wordplay, using clever metaphors and humor to deliver sharp critiques of those in power. Their songs were a living newspaper, set to a syncopated beat. This tradition of lyrical commentary struck a chord with Fela Kuti. As his own political consciousness grew, he looked for new ways to express his ideas. He saw in the Calypsonians a model for how to be a musician with a message. He admired figures like the Mighty Sparrow, who could be both entertaining and deeply political in the same song. Fela began to move away from simple love songs or party anthems. His lyrics became longer, more narrative. He started to tell stories, to name names, to call out the injustices he saw around him in Nigerian society. He was becoming a Calypsonian in his own right, but with a Nigerian accent. The structure of his songs began to change. Instead of a typical verse-chorus-verse format, Fela adopted a more sermon-like approach. He would often start with a long instrumental section, setting the mood and the groove. Then, he would step to the microphone and begin his yabis, a Nigerian pidgin English term for a kind of playful yet pointed verbal assault. He would preach, he would teach, he would mock. He was using the song as a platform, a soapbox. This style of extended social commentary, delivered over an irresistible rhythm, owed a great deal to the calypso tradition of Trinidad. This fusion of Caribbean lyrical style and African rhythm was potent. It made Fela's music dangerous to the authorities. A simple dance track could be ignored, but a 20-minute song detailing government corruption, broadcast on the radio and played in clubs across the country, could not. The calypso influence gave Fela a powerful tool for his political war. It taught him that music could be a chronicle of the times. It showed him how to use wit and rhythm to speak truth to power, a lesson that would come to define his career and solidify Afrobeat's reputation as the ultimate form of protest music. The blending of these Caribbean elements, the rhythmic weight of reggae and the lyrical bite of calypso, did not dilute Afrobeat. In fact, it made it stronger. It made it more universal. By weaving these sounds and styles into his music, Fela Kuti was consciously creating a Pan-African musical language. He was, demonstrating that the cultural connections forged in the trauma of the past could be a source of immense power in the present. It was a musical statement of unity. It declared that the children of Africa, whether in Lagos, Kingston, or Port of Spain, shared a common groove and a common destiny. This new hybrid sound was also more accessible to a global audience. People in Europe or America might not have understood Yoruba polyrhythms, but they recognized the feel of reggae. They understood the idea of a protest song. The Caribbean vibes acted as a bridge, inviting listeners from all over the world into Afrobeat's complex and beautiful house. It gave them a familiar doorway to walk through. Once inside, they could discover the intricate guitar work, the powerful horn arrangements, and the mesmerizing drumming that made the music so unique. The Caribbean connection was key to Afrobeat's international journey, but this exchange was not a one-way street. As Afrobeat grew in popularity, its influence flowed back across the Atlantic. Reggae artists started to incorporate the complex horn arrangements and extended instrumental jams of Afrobeat. You can hear it in the work of bands like Third World, who blended funk, soul, and Afrobeat into their reggae sound. Musicians across the diaspora were listening to each other, inspiring each other. A creative feedback loop was established, a constant conversation that continued to push the boundaries of black music in exciting new directions, enriching all the genres involved. Ultimately, the Caribbean influence was the final spice in the Afrobeat stew. It added depth, flavor, and a crucial link to the wider world. It transformed the music from a Nigerian phenomenon into a global force. This fusion of West African tradition, American funk, and Caribbean vibes created a sound that was truly one of a kind. It was the sound of a people reclaiming their history, connecting with their scattered family, and forging a bold new identity. It was a language built from a shared groove, a language that everyone everywhere could understand and dance to. Afrobeat's journey from Lagos to the world wasn't instant. London in the 1970s became its first international home, where Fela Kuti's records landed in shops and DJs mixed his hypnotic tracks into club sets. London's diverse scene helped Afrobeat cross the ocean and conquer the world. If London was the launchpad, Paris was the amplifier. France's deep ties to West Africa made Paris a second home for Afrobeat, with Fela Kuti's music embraced by a passionate multicultural audience. French labels like Celluloid and Barclay gave Afrobeat global reach, and Paris became a creative hub, inspiring new generations and sounds. By the 1980s, Afrobeat was a global force, no longer just a Nigerian sound but a respected genre with passionate international fans. Fela Kuti's music, with its powerful messages, became a soundtrack for liberation, reaching massive audiences worldwide. David Byrne championed Afrobeat, bringing its rhythms to talking heads and launching Luwaka Bop to share it globally. Afrobeat broke barriers, uniting people everywhere, a sound for the world stage. The fire Fela Kuti and Tony Allen lit in the 1970s never died. In the 21st century, a new generation picked up the torch. Artists like Burna Boy and Wizkid fused Afrobeat's roots with hip-hop, pop, and dancehall, creating Afrobeats, a global movement. Today, they lead a cultural revolution, making African music a worldwide force and ensuring the legacy thrives. When Beyoncé released The Lion King, The Gift, she made a powerful statement, blending her R&B with Afrobeats and collaborating deeply with African artists. The album And Black is King celebrated Pan-African identity, amplifying African voices and rhythms for the world. Beyoncé's Bow to the Ancestors was a tribute, recognizing Africa's heartbeat in today's global music. Afrobeat and its Caribbean cousins have reshaped global pop, blurring lines between genres and cultures. Today's generation grew up with the world's music at their fingertips, making this fusion the new normal. The Afro-Caribbean groove is now a core part of global pop, connecting cultures everywhere. The groove Fela started is now the world's groove, a joyful rhythm that keeps on playing. Afrobeat is more than music. It's a global groove born from West African roots, shaped by legends like Fela Kuti and fused with Caribbean and American sounds. It built a bridge of sound, uniting people across continents and generations. Today, Afrobeat's rhythm connects us all, reminding us that wherever we're from, we can find common ground on the dance floor.